Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement,
Heads of state and government, dear colleagues,
Monsieur le Président, Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo,
President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the outgoing chairman, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, ambassadors, heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf and on my own behalf, I would like first of all to thank the government and the people of Ethiopia for the friendly welcome and the generous hospitality that they accord us once again in this legendary city of Addis Ababa, the cradle of our dream of freedom and African unity. I do measure the honor and responsibility that go along with the trust that you have placed in me, together with the members of the Bureau, to steer the destiny of our organization during 1 year. I thank you and reassure you of our commitment to work together and in concert with all the member countries in the exercise of our term of office. I want to pay tribute to the founding fathers of the organization. 6 decades after, their enlightened vision continues to inspire our effort to live together and enlighten our march of solidarity towards the ideal of African integration. It is rightly in this Pan-Africanist spirit that President Leopold Sedar Senghor had proposed at the OAU Summit of July 1964 to establish a permanent political and moral authority of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government in order to give a high-level impetus to the conduct of the affairs of the continent. This is how this responsibility of current chairman of our organization emerged, a responsibility which President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo has carried out with consistency and devotion. Thank you, dear Felix, for the considerable efforts that you have made in the service of our continent. While our union is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, we can be proud of the progress made within the framework of the major initiatives such as NEPAD, PIDA, APRM, Vision 2063, institutional reform, the Great Green Wall, AFCFTA, and more recently our coordinated response to COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, we still face many and urgent challenges, whether it relates to peace and security, the fight against terrorism, the unconstitutional change of government, protection of environment, health, and economic and social development. The urgent need for peace and security reminds us of a special responsibility in the fight against terrorism, the peaceful settlement of disputes between member states, and to take care of the situations of internal crisis. We cannot turn our face away from all these lives that are lost, the bereaved families, the millions of displaced persons or refugees, these schools and health facilities that are closed, and disintegrated social cohesion. Our common sense call on us to silence the guns and entrench a culture of dialogue and consultation within the framework of the African Mechanism for Conflict Resolution. In fact, divisions delay our development, and therefore I call for a scrutiny of our conscience in order to have the peace of the brave, in order to devote ourselves to other urgent needs that are a source of concern. It therefore applies to this health crisis linked to the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to ensure as quickly as possible our pharmaceutical and medical sovereignty. I sincerely thank President Cyril Ramaphosa, who, with the support of the Commission and Africa CDC, has made all the necessary efforts in the response to COVID and also access to vaccine as well as its production in Africa. In the face of the crisis, an ecosystem of hygienical products, pharmaceutical products, medical products has in fact been initiated on the continent. The production of vaccine is already underway in many countries, and others will see. Beyond the response to COVID, we need to maintain this dynamism by maintaining health issues on our agenda in order to support the emergence of an African pharmaceutical industry that can meet our essential needs and face pandemics like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. I would like also to draw the attention of our summit to the ravages caused by cancer, a silent killer, which causes more than 20 million deaths per year across the world and more than 700,000 in Africa. We have to add to that 40% of our countries have no radiotherapy mechanisms or equipment to deal with this cancer. In fact, with this concern, the International Atomic Energy Agency has taken the initiative of Rays of Hope in order to support and build the capacities of African member states, particularly in the fight against cancer, thanks to nuclear technology, particularly medical imagery, nuclear medicine, and radiotherapy. I sincerely encourage our countries to support the campaign that is Rays of Hope as it contributes to attaining the objectives of sustainable development and Agenda 2063. Our urgent needs are also related to the economic situation. Africa is lagging behind in the field of development despite all the potentialities that we have. 30 million square kilometers, more than 1.3 billion inhabitants, important reserves in water and hydrocarbon, 60% of cultivable and arable lands, 40% of gold reserve, 85 to 95% of metal reserves, chrome, platinum, more than 50% of cobalt reserves, and a third of reserves of bauxite. So in spite of these handicaps, Africa has the necessary capacity and potential to ensure the conditions of its emergence. Furthermore, our continent is making progress. The governments are settling down to task. There is a creative youth which undertakes certain ventures and succeeds. Millions of men and women are working, invest, and are creating wealth. All these positive energies contribute to the structural transformation of the continent by making Africa of modern infrastructures, road, highways, railways, ports, airports emerge. And the industrial platforms and digital platforms, and rightly within the spirit of this Africa, which is on its way to emerge, should be the theme of our summit, and with the relevant proposal made by President Alassane Ouattara. Build a resilience in nutritional security on the African continent, ensure and accelerate human capital development and socio-economic development, and this reminds us of our urgent need to ensure food security and food sovereignty by producing more with agriculture, livestock, fishery, through the modernization of our production tools and methods of conservation and processing of our food produce, the improvement of the inputs, the control of water, development of the value chains, and the facilitation of access to markets. The emerging Africa should also rely on its own active forces, youth and women. Youth should remain as the very source of concern of our policies, because they are the majority of the population, and we cannot harness the demographic dividend if our youth are not given the necessary education and training which prepare them for active life. The situation of women, in fact, challenges us because women constitute the other half of the continent. Africa cannot develop when millions of women and young girls continue to suffer violent treatment that is meted out, which is unequal and is discriminatory against women. I want to make an appeal for a greater mobilization of the continent, the public authorities, public opinion, civil society, families, and communities against all forms of violence to women and to young girls, and for their empowerment. It is an essential condition for the progress of our continent and our collective well-being. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, if the destiny of the continent is in our hands, it also depends on the political, economic, and financial governance which in fact we are facing in our countries. On your behalf, I will continue this advocacy for a more open multilateralism, which is more transparent and more inclusive, to begin with a more equitable representation of Africa on the UN Security Council in conformity with the Eswatini Consensus. I also wish that we concentrate our efforts on the reform of international economic and financial governance for a better access of countries to the development financing resources. Our economies are underfinanced because the rules and rigid procedures impede the access of our countries to consistent resources in the long term and at rates that are excruciating and unbearable for the financing of its development. Our economies are therefore poorly financed because they continue to pay interest rates that are very high because of an unequal evaluation of investment risk in Africa and an unequal system. In 2020, for example, while the entire world was suffering the impact of COVID-19, 18 out of the 32 African countries were evaluated by one of the agencies, that is, rating agencies that in fact brought down the evaluation and the rating of African countries, 56 as against to 31%. So 20% of the rating parameters of our country depend on subjective factors, whether it are cultural, linguistic, and without any relation with the fundamentals that determine the stability of an economy. All these makes it that the perception of investment risk in Africa remains higher than the real risk, which in fact increases the insurance premium and obviously penalizes competitiveness of our economies. With the support of the Commission, I deem it necessary that we establish a task force of the Union to consider thoroughly the problem of the financing of our economies, including through the reforms of the rules of the OECD and the establishment of a Pan-African rating agency and the establishment of a financial stability mechanism on which the African Development Bank is already working. Other efforts could further be made on the harmonization of our national legislation and the exchange of the best practices in the mining industry and the oil industry for a fair remuneration of our resources. These projects could obviously take time, but I think it is necessary so that we move from complaints to acts by laying the foundation of our efforts. In the immediate future, I will continue our advocacy for the reallotment of the special drawing rights with the historical emission of the SDR, $650 billion, and Africa could only have $33 billion. So when you look at the impact of the crisis, Africa needs an additional financing of at least $252 billion by 2025 in order to cushion the shock and also to have its economic recovery. Consequently, I will continue our advocacy for the reallotment for African countries and according to the modalities to be agreed of $100 billion of the special drawing rights of the rich countries. And obviously we need to reach the necessary amount that we need in order to support African economies, and this was already fixed at the Paris conference. A substantial amount of these special drawing rights, together with the IMF, can these be reallocated through the ADB, that is our continental bank, taking into account its role in the development financing and to support our efforts for recovery through quality investments, which obviously will motivate growth. In addition, in order to expand our possibilities of financing the major projects, development projects, it is high time to amend the agreement on the African Development Fund, that is the AD, which will enable it to accede to capital markets and to raise $33 billion, which will obviously supplement its own resources of $25 billion. More, in addition to the ADF resources, it will give more possibilities for development of our countries. I therefore appeal to our partners to ensure the modernization of the African Development Fund and also other similar institutions, more especially as the status has remained unchanged since its establishment in 1972. On your behalf, dear colleagues, I also have the firm intention to state clearly and loudly our message for renewed partnership that can be fairer and more equitable. More than 60 years of the first years of independence, Africa is more than ever before decided and determined to take its destiny in its own hands. Our continent cannot be a field which is just for the feast of others. We are open to all partnerships without exclusion, neither exclusiveness, on condition that it is mutually beneficial and respects our development priorities and our choice of society. In this spirit, I welcome the excellent results and outcome of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum of November 2021 and the Turkey-Africa Summit held in December last year. I confirm that our meeting with the European Union will meet with the same success, taking into account the preparations that are underway for this meeting, just like our partnership with Korea, Russia, Japan, and the Arab world, and obviously and without doubt with the United States. All these partnerships will be placed in the same dynamics in the renewed partnership, which is a win-win partnership, our choice of society and our options for our development. Another challenge for us is the energy transition within the framework of the fight against climate change and global warming, and Africa is a stakeholder. The margins of COP26 of Glasgow, developed countries have unilaterally adopted the decision to put an end to the external financing of fossil fuel, even the clean ones like gas, while some of them continue to lose more polluting sources like charcoal and diesel fuel. At the time, with important discoveries over the past years, gas opened for our countries real prospects of individual access to electricity and support to industrialization of the continent, put an end to the financing of gas will deeply affect and thwart our efforts of economic and social development. That is why, by remaining committed to the fight against climate change and global warming, and according to the principle of the common but differentiated responsibility, the joint and differentiated responsibility, it is legitimate that our countries claim for a fair and equitable energy transition. Together, let us mobilize ourselves for the success of COP27, which our brother President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be hosting this year. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, these challenges, we are going to face them by devoting more time to our discussions on vital issues for our countries, with renewed and rationalized working methods within the spirit of the institutional reform that we have been carrying out under the dynamic leadership of President Paul Kagame. The imperative need for result, in fact, to implement our reforms in order to improve the performances of the Union, including through the building of its financial capacities. I am thinking of the division of labor between the Union, the regional economic communities, and the regional mechanisms, the reform of the legal and quasi-legal organs, the operationalization of the Peace Fund and the African Standby Force, as well as a better articulation and use of our agencies. The Africa that we want is also the one that will also recover all its cultural heritage. These that have been expoliated will remain at the heart of our agenda because it is an integral part of our civilizational identity and which links us to our past and is the path that we have to bequeath to future generations. The Africa that we want to build cannot obviously forget its cultural heritage. Time will not take away our collective memory. The weight of history and those of the present cannot prohibit and prevent our will to remove all the prejudices and that impede our march towards progress. We say yes to the receiving and giving process through dialogue and the dialogue of cultures and civilizations, but there can be no injunction against our civilization and our choices. In this spirit, I will leave no stone unturned in order to defend the interests of our continent with the support of the members of the Bureau and yours, dear colleagues. Thus, and together, we can bring our building block, the continental building block, to our dreams, and Africa at peace, free, more united, and more interdependent, and showing solidarity, and Africa which is standing and which is marching towards greater progress and prosperity. Long live Africa, long live African Union, and I thank you for your attention.